how this introvert learned to sell, and it's not what you think. So you would think that since my first job out of college was in sales, and I had worked in sales for 15 years of my life. I then went on to teach sales in a university. I got my PhD and I went to teach sales, and I did that for 15 years of my life. I taught sales to some of the best in the country. I was part of the largest sales competition and helped people prepare for that. And now I am helping entrepreneurs continue to learn how to sell, how to sell when you hate to sell, uh, how to sell in a way that works for you. You would think with all this sales background that I learned in a traditional method, and that's not the case. So how did this happen? Well, if you're here for a story, I got one for you, and I hope you enjoy it. But I think a lot of us have learned to do things because we had to do them. Things that we had to do that we didn't want to do, we had to force ourselves to do it. And maybe we didn't like the way we saw other people doing it, and we knew it wouldn't work for us. So that's how we came up with our own way. And that's how I learned to sell. I learned to sell in such a way that worked for me. An introvert, socially awkward, someone that put me in a small group, I'm fine, but put me in with a stranger, a crowd, what have you, and I would feel so uncomfortable. And then on top of that, you want me to go and ask someone for money in exchange for something I have that they might not even appreciate as much as I do? Yeah. So that was back, and I won't date myself, but I probably will, a very long time ago, decades ago, when I graduated from college. I didn't land the dream job that I thought I was going to get. Let's just face it. Back in my day, we were trained. We were given the mindset that to go work for a big corporation was the dream job. Now, oh, you couldn't even, I really get sick going up in a skyscraper elevator, not because I'm afraid of heights. I'm not. I get sick because I just feel the aura. I'm not into the woo-woo stuff, but I just feel that aura of all the cubicles, all the glass door offices, corner offices, mail rooms, etc. It just, I hate that life. But the reality was, back in the day, that was the thing. I mean, we had movies that glamorized it. Wall Street, The Secret of My Success, The Wolf of Wall Street. You know, those were things that we aspired to be, and that didn't happen for me. So I had to fall back on the one connection that I had, and that was a family business. And the only role left for me, because I had been interning there over the summers, the only role left for me to do was sales. And that was not what I wanted to do, but I was kind of paying my dues, if you will. And to make it worse, it was insurance. Selling insurance was my first real job. I couldn't be more petrified, more horrified, and more disgusted than the idea of that. But it was a family business. And so that kind of made it cool. Other things that made it cool, it was business to business, right? So I'm not selling life insurance, health insurance to somebody. I'm not selling car insurance. I'm selling insurance to another business, right? And that was cool. But even better, it was to high risk ventures that Jake from State Farm wouldn't dare touch. So amusement parks, carnival owners, etc. So that was really cool. And we sold across the whole entire country into Canada. So it also meant that I got to travel a lot. Now, we were based down in Florida, and we would travel out to where the fairs were for us to go meet our clients, the carnivals. So I'm about a month or so into my sales job. Before then, my first internship was literally the mailroom. Started off in the mailroom, then I moved over to the claims department, and now it was time for me to work in sales. So about a month in, I'm observing all the what we call producers on how they sell, and these these guys, very gender specific. It was that culture. These guys were very typically, stereotypically sales types. Whether they were formally trained or trained with from their culture, they were old school sales. Now, if you can imagine that, they weren't car salesmen. This was business to business, but it sure was the liking to that. They were high pressure. There was good relationships being built. There's no doubt about that because it was a small industry, but it was still icky to me the way they did it. And, there's no formal training. Excuse me, there's no formal training. There's just, this is how you do it. You watch me, then you go do it. So I remember my mentor at the time, Dean, guy from Brooklyn, he knocks on my door at the office and says, "Hey, Shane, next Monday we're going up. We're going to meet my clients." And I'm like, cool, good. Get me out of this office. We flew up into Indianapolis, got in our white Ford Taurus rental car, drove what seemed like for 3 days, but just 2 hours later, after driving past cornfields, we arrive at a church. And in this parking lot of this church stood some of the most amazing carnival rides you'd ever seen, right? So what a sight. On my left, out the window, cornfields. On my right, the church. And right in front of me, Ferris wheels, tilt-a-whirls, scramblers, whatever, they're all there. It's really exciting industry to be in, I got to tell you. But we're sitting in the car, and James points over to the right, and he says, "You see that trailer over there?" "Yeah." "Well, that's where my client is, the carnival owner is, and I'm going to go meet with him for a couple hours." And I'm like, cool. I'll just sit here, right? I'm along for the ride, right? If you don't want me in there, I'm good. And then he goes, "And what you're going to do is you see this row of concession trailers in front of you. Now, picture when you're at a carnival, when you're at a fair or festival, there are all these food trailers, funnel cakes, which, hey, by the way, my grandmother and great-grandmother introduced the funnel cake into the public. Another story for another time, or ask me about it down below and I'll share it. But, they're the funnel cake stands. They're the pizza joints. They are, whatever you like, the turkey legs, the lemonades. That's what was in front of me, all those trailers. Those particular trailers are independent business owners. The carnival owner owns the rides, maybe the games as well. But the food typically comes from independent business owners, so they would need their own policies. So Gene says, "You see that row of trailers right in front of us?" "Yeah." He goes, "I want you to go sell them insurance." I'm like, oh crap, I did not expect that, right? Are you going to train me? Are you going to walk with me? What are you going to do to help me? Because I don't know what the hell I'm doing, and I don't even want to do it. I was just, I guess, mentally putting it off as long as possible. So I knew it was too late for me to learn from him. But I'm like, okay, well, he left the car. He walked over to the carnival trailer, knocked, so an open door. He disappeared inside. I'm like, okay, I'm still in the Ford Taurus. I'm sitting here. I'm good. And then I realize he's probably going to look out the trailer window, see me sitting in the car doing nothing. That's a fail. I've got too much pride for that. The first thing I got to do, if anything, is I got to get out of this car. So I did. I got out of the car. Shut the door. Okay, well, he can still see me here. So I got to walk. I'm going to walk towards those trailers. But it's like 11 a.m. The carnival's not going to open till 5 or 6. So what are the odds anyone's here? I'm going to walk past them all. No one's around. And I get to tell Gene, hey, I tried, but no one was there. All right, big deal. So I start walking, no problem. And that very first trailer, guess what? The sides are open. I see right in. There's movement in that trailer. And I'm walking there and I see that movement. And I freeze like a deer in headlights, right? I'm like, I'm ready to pivot around and walk back. Just as the person I saw in that trailer turns around and notices me. And I'm like, oh, crap. If I turn around now, that doesn't look good. So, all right, well, he still can't hear me. So I'll walk up to this guy, say hello, and move on, right? I walk up, um, you know, I walk up and look up because people in the trailer up a little higher. And I'm like, oh gosh, what do I say? And I'm like, oh wait, I'm a human being. I've met someone before, as awkward as it is for me. And I said, hi, I'm Shane. And surprisingly, the guy said, hi, I'm John. And he extended his hand to meet mine. And I great. And I said, okay, gotta think of something else to say. So I told him who I was and who I'm with. And, I'll just say ABC Insurance Company. And that was kind of, after I said that, there was kind of an awkward silence and realized I got to keep talking. And so the only thing I knew is, being in this business as an intern for the last couple of years meant I knew a few things about it, not a lot about it, sure didn't know sales, but I knew that these food concessionaires are often, like I said, small business owners. They often had more than one trailer. They often were a family business, right? They might have had children, brothers, etc., that were helping them out. And so I just, just so it wasn't like high and by, that was awkward. I asked him a couple questions. I said, John, how long have you been at a food concessionaire? And he told me a number, something like 6 years. And I asked him, is this your only trailer? And he said, no, actually, I have two more. And they're over at another festival about an hour and a half east of here. Who's managing those for you? Oh, my wife and my oldest son are doing that. And I said, okay, great. So you're here by yourself. Okay, great. We were having a conversation, and it wasn't wasting his time talking about the weather. But I knew if I had to just keep the conversation going, I should probably talk a little bit more about the business and maybe relate it to what I'm doing, because it's the only thing I know. Oddly enough, I was in the food concession business as a little kid because my mom had a funnel cake stand that we toured around. But I still didn't know a lot about it. I couldn't necessarily relate too much with him. So I related through what I knew from what I was in as an insurance company. And one thing I knew from one of my summers as an intern was we had a special program just for these concessionaires. These concessionaires, if they went to Jake from State Farm, now Jake wasn't there back in the day, but if they went to their Main Street State Farm representative, the State Farm rep would say, no, well, we don't cover you carnies, right? They would pigeonhole them into a carny. And if they did say yes, they would charge a lot of money. And if they did say yes, the policy only covered them for like 100 miles. Certainly not, interstate levels. So, just to make conversation even better, I asked John, I said, as you know, I'm with ABC Insurance, who do you have your insurance with? And he told me, and guess what? It was, like a Jake from State Farm. Again, it wasn't Jake from State Farm, but it was your local guy that you probably would have gotten your home or car insurance from. And so I kind of knew something that it made me realize that John, this concessionaire, this small business owner with a family involvement, was running a business and probably paying too much for his insurance and probably not even getting covered properly because, oh, I forgot to tell you one of the other questions I asked him just to shoot the breeze was, Sean, where are you from? And he says, oh, we're from Florida. And I go, Kid Town? Because guess what? That's where, oh, I'm from that area. And Gibtown, the more formally known as Gibsonton, was known as winter quarters for all these carnivals on the eastern seaboard. So basically what they do, as the weather warms up, they start traveling north. So they live in Florida, and as the winter goes away, they go to Georgia, South Carolina, Alabama, what have you. And then it warms up further. And so they go up to festivals and fairs north of that and into Virginia and Ohio, then up into Michigan and the New England states until it gets too cold again by that time of year. And then they start having to make their way back down again. And they do a lot of spring events until they get all the way down to Florida where it's still warm enough and they take a break in, say, December and January before hitting the road again. So once he said Florida, I was like, oh, are you from Gibtown? And he kind of took a step back and realized I kind of know what I'm talking about. He said, yeah, okay. So I knew who he was and what he was doing. But that information was really interesting information that I was able to use in that next part of the conversation when I asked him who he's insured with. Because once he said that, I kind of knew he's probably paying too much. He's probably not covered all the way up here in the Indiana. Yeah. And so I don't know what came over me other than the fact I can tell you, I knew I could help him. I knew that he didn't know that he had an option that he never knew about. He just knew he could get insurance from State Farm, from, Geico, whatever, I don't know. And that's the only thing he knew. He didn't know that ABC Insurance Company, the company that specializes in the carnival industry, existed. And he didn't know that with our existence, because we know the risks aren't as bad as what Jake from State Farm thinks, so we don't charge as much. We also know what John is going to do in his business, and that means travel a whole hell of a lot, puts on thousands of miles. We'll be literally more than 1,000 miles away from home at some point during this year, and that he needs to be covered all the way up there, even up in the tip of Michigan or Maine or even Canada. So yeah, I didn't know what came over me other than the fact that I knew I had something that was going to help John, and he didn't even know. He didn't know what I had. So I asked him, it gave me the courage because I wanted to help him. It gave me the courage to say, John, do you mind if I ask you if you know your policy that you have with the company you mentioned? Do you know if they cover you up here? And then you could see in his face that he kind of knew he wasn't covered, but he acted like he didn't know for sure. And he says, I don't know, Shane. There was something in there, some mileage on it, but I don't know. I think we're okay up here. Okay, thank you. I didn't jump in. I wasn't here to sell to him. I'm just still kind of learning about him. And then I was like, John, do you know how much you're paying? Would you mind giving me just a ballpark figure? And that was really weird for me to say. But again, I knew 99% of the time they're going to be charging like twice as much as what he should be paying. And he told me, and it was about twice as much. And I said, okay, thank you. I didn't judge him. I didn't slam Jake from State Farm or anything. I'm not there to sell. But then it came over me. It's like, golly, I just met this guy who was willing to share this information just through this conversation with me. And I realized that he's paying twice as much than he should. And he's probably not even getting covered for it. So basically, if he were to have an accident, he's paying 2x for zero, right? So that's exactly what I said, John. If there's something that we could do as an insurance company, make sure that you're covered no matter where you travel this year, and also save you, about half of what you're spending. Would you be interested in hearing about it? And he looked down at me, and we've just been having this conversation, and he said, yeah, I would. So I told him, I knew from working in the business in the previous summers, I knew we had set rates. If you have one concession trailer, it's this. If you have two, it's this. And if you have three, it's that. And it went up to 5 before we had to get special permission. So I knew that he's covered this far away, and I knew how much he'd be paying with us, which was about half of what he's currently paying. And so I told him, I said, we cover no matter where you go. If you go into Canada, you just let us know as well, but we've got you covered. And our rates for your 3 trailers would be this amount. And I told him, and you could see the look on his eyes, realizing that, wow, that's really great, right? You saw a sense of relief, because now that I look back on it as a business owner, he was living with pain every time it came to insurance. He knew he had to have it, but he wasn't sure if he was covered. But he had no idea that this pain could be alleviated. And then here I come, just someone that didn't pitch to him, but just had a conversation with him, really just let John do the talking. I just guided the conversation through my questions. And it kept him engaged. You could see that he was proud to talk about his business, and the fact that he had his wife and son working with him, and his future high school graduate son that was graduating that year would start out with them in the fall. So he was proud, and he wanted to share. He wanted to talk. He was not offended by me, by being a salesperson, because I didn't come across as a salesperson. So long story short, here gets to a little funny part. John did say he did have one question, and I was not experienced enough to really tell him the answer. I had an idea, but I knew if I answered incorrectly, that would be bad. So, he asked me his question. I told him, I said, John, I really don't know the answer to that for sure, but my boss is in the Carnival owner's trailer. When he comes out, I'll go ask him. I'll let you know, before we leave and before you open. And, if that lets you know, if this is a good fit or not, then you'll know. Okay. Absolutely, Shane. If that's not an issue, then I'd like to do business with you. I'm like, okay, all right, awesome. I said thank you to John. I shook his hand. I probably had a 21-year-old's eager grin on my face. And I went on the rest of the trailers, still intimidated. And luckily, no other people were out at those other trailers. John was the only one out there that day. I went back to the rental car and didn't sit in it. I sat on it. I leaned up against it, just waiting for Gene to come out. Gene finally comes out, which seemed like forever. And I walked right up to him with such energy and eagerness. And I said, Gene, guess what? I sold a policy. And he goes, what? You can't do that. I said, why? You told me to go sell something, and I did, And he goes, no, you can't do that, Shane. You don't even have a license, right? So I was like, oh, dear Lord. Kind of got set up for that one. But here's a very eye-opening part of this whole story. I asked Gene that question that John had, and Gene affirmed that, oh, yeah, that's no problem. And I'm so excited at this point. I'm like, gosh, so I got a policy. Okay, it won't be mine because I don't have a license, but I'm the one that made this happen. And I didn't even sell it to him, did I? That wasn't sales. That's not, hey, how you doing? I'm Shane, the super nice guy, and I've got the best policy coverage for everybody. My competitors suck, and you're stupid if you don't buy from me. I didn't do any of that. I just had a conversation to learn about John. And in the way, I helped John kind of uncover his own concerns to make him realize that there's probably another choice out there. So anyway, Dean and I walked together to go back to John to let John know the answer to his concern. And John's still in there. He sees us approaching, and Gene, Mr. Brooklyn, he kind of morphed. John's up in his trailer looking down, extending his hand as Gene's approaching to introduce himself. And Gene just, without even extending his hand, kind of just morphed into the wolf and just starts salesy, coming at him with blah, 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 and trying to sell to him when he was already sold. And you could just see the look in John's eyes, like, dude, you're nothing like the conversation I just had with Shane an hour ago. What the hell? And it just totally turned John on. And I didn't make that sale, or Gene didn't make that sale that day, because he was being sold to all of a sudden instead of just being talked with, right? And from that day on, I knew they can't tell me a damn thing. They can't train me, teach me to do a damn thing. That is their way. I knew my way, and it worked for me. This guy, the introvert, the person that would rather ask a question and then shut up and let the other person talk. Let them feel that they're in control, even though I'm guiding it with my questions. I knew that's the way I wanted to do it, and that's the way I did it. And I kept working on it and perfecting it. And to the point that when I later on in life became an academic, they asked me to teach sales. I couldn't get away from sales. I really didn't want to be in sales anymore. But now I learned how corporate sales worked, because that's what the textbooks were when I was an academic, to teach the students, the traditional students. And I incorporated that with the way I taught myself. And it can be a little slower, but it's so much more effective. And people want to continue to work with me. Going back to the example of insurance, you buy a policy once a year. If you buy a policy 1 year from someone that you really didn't enjoy working with, you are probably going to choose to seek out another one. And a lot of people will pay more to seek out someone they'd rather work with. The way I was selling, people were buying from me. When it came upon renewal time, they would renew with me, and they would pay more money to stay with me because they didn't want to deal with those other salesy people out there at other firms. So yeah, that's how this whole process came. Now, I've since developed it into something I call the NICE process. It's all based on an acronym of the NICE. We'll talk about that some other time. But yeah, if you just follow the nature of that example that I just talked about, I think you're going to find it so comfortable, so easy. I'm not saying you will be super comfortable nor super confident. Some of us are always going to be too intimidated to do full speed or 100%, but you will be more comfortable and you'll be more confident, probably twice, if not more times than you would trying to do it the other way. So practice that. We'll talk more about what you have to do to make it work, but think about that. How would you go about it in your business, in your industry, to your targeted customers, to your niche? How would that look to you? So yeah, look for more of these windows. We'll break it down into more detail. But just remember this: nice guys finish and outlast. Thanks, guys. See you soon.